In observing Psychology Month 2022, we are here to raise awareness about the role psychology plays in our lives. So in a moment, join me in an open discussion with leading experts from the field of psychology who will discuss and explore the different emotions we experience and how they define us and our humanity. After the forum, enjoy a special reading of the book titled The Science of Feelings: What Psychological Research Tells Us About Our Emotions, authored by one of our panelists today, Dr. Eugene T. Now, to commence today's event, it is my great pleasure to call upon Professor Graham Wilkinson, Vice Chancellor of Sunway University, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Professor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Hani. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or perhaps good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'd like to welcome you all to this online event hosted by Sunway University Press, which begins a special series this month entitled What's Up with Psychology? So today we're going to be talking about feelings, or more specifically, the science of feelings, what psychological research tells us about our emotions, which is the title of a book published last year by Sunway University Press, which has been very well received. I have to say it's a very good book. I have it here. It's a very, very interesting book. And if you don't have a copy, it's available from all the major online e-book stores as well as in many bookshops. So please do get a copy. We are very fortunate to have the author of that book plus a distinguished panel of psychology experts to discuss the topic of feelings this morning. And I'm sure feelings is a subject that very much interests us all as we experience them, of course, every day, whether it's feelings of perhaps happiness, sadness, love, fear, anger, joy, pride, and many more, as you will find in the book. So please do get it and read. I believe this morning we have quite a large audience comprising psychologists, of course, but also academics, students, representatives from the Ministry of Health here in Malaysia, public health officers, and of course, interested members of the public. So whoever you are, whatever you do, or wherever you are from, you are very welcome with us here online this morning. So our event this morning is focused on a panel discussion, and I'm particularly delighted to welcome Dr. Eugene T from Help University, who is the author of the book and someone who appears regularly in the media here in Malaysia in relation to psychological matters. And he, of course, is our first panelist. And joining him, we have Dr. Joffe Ellis, who is also a leading psychologist, author, and academic who teaches at Columbia University in New York. And then with them, we have Dr. Mei-Hua, who is an industrial and organizational psychologist and one of our leading psychology academics and an associate dean here in Sunway University. And I'm also delighted to welcome our panel moderator, Professor Alvin Ong, a clinical psychologist and also an associate dean here in Sunway University. He was founding president of the Malaysian Society of Clinical Psychology and also appears regularly in the media. So with this impressive lineup of speakers, I'm sure we're all eager to get into the discussion. Before commencing, let me thank Carol Wong and her team at Sunway University Press, who've done an excellent job in publishing and distributing the book, as well as in organizing today's event. I know that a lot of work has gone on behind the scenes, so I'm very grateful for all of that. So without further ado, let's move on to the forum with the author and the other expert panelists. So thank you all in the audience for joining in today, and please do enjoy the event. So at this point, I'll hand back to our MC and then on to our distinguished moderator. Thank you. Have a great time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wilkinson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to today's forum, let's have a quick photo session with everybody present to commemorate this special event. May I seek everyone's cooperation to turn on your cameras? Hello, I know it's early, but we'd love to see all of you. Hi, Miss Sumitra Naidu. Lisa Ku, hi, thank you for joining us. Miss Yvonne Ng, hi. Mr. Chan Waitak, thank you for joining us. Hi. Thank you for turning on your cameras. I think we are all quite ready. Just give me a second. Thank you, everyone. Please turn on your cameras. Thank you. All right. Are we ready? Get ready and smile as we count down from 3, 2, 1. One more? All right. One more time. Smile as we count down from 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for your participation and patience. All right. Now, without further ado, let's begin with the forum where we'll go on a journey to understanding emotions and the science behind them. We are honored to welcome our distinguished panelists for today. And if you have any questions for them, please type in the chat box and we will address them during the Q&A session. Let's now again welcome our panelists. Psychologist and mental health counselor, Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis from Columbia University, New York. Welcome, Dr. Debbie. Industrial and organizational psychologist, associate professor, Dr. Lin Mei-Hua from Sunway University, Malaysia. Hi, Dr. Lin. And author and associate professor and research coordinator at the Department of Psychology, Dr. Eugene T. from Help University, Malaysia. Hello, Dr. Eugene. And moderating today's forum is the one and only Professor Elvin Ng, Associate Dean International of the School of Medical and Life Sciences, Sunway University, and founding president of the Malaysian Society of Clinical Psychology. Good morning, Professor Elvin. Over to you.
Morning. Oh, okay. It's to me now. Thank you
Yes.
very much, Hani. And thank you very much, everyone, for turning up this morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. Gong Xi Fa Chai for those who are celebrating Chinese New Year. Happy Lunar New Year to those who are not Chinese, but also celebrating Lunar New Year. It's a nice festive season. Christmas is one day usually. Chinese New Year is 15 days. We got a whole 15 days of celebrations. It's wonderful, lots of nice feelings, and we shall be talking about the science of feelings. It's also wonderful because in 4 days' time, today's the 10th, right? We have got Valentine's Day. And on the 15th night of Chinese New Year is usually called the Chinese Valentine's Day. So you've got 2 Valentine's Day in a month if you're Chinese. If you're not, you can still celebrate anyway. So it's all about feelings. How are you guys feeling this morning, night? All right? All good? If not good, never mind. We shall talk about the science anyway. And who knows, maybe even the arts of feeling. All right. Okay. So before we start discussions, I would like to show a short video. It's about 4 minutes long. And this video is by Professor Baba Schiff of Stanford University, talking about his research findings that essentially says we tend to make decisions very emotionally. Let's have a look. All right, so can we have the video, please?
Most of our decisions, whether we like it or not, most of our actions, most of our behavior, most of our experiences are constantly being shaped at the instinctual level. I would argue that about 90 to 95% of our decisions, even important decisions, you might think that you're being rational, but keep in mind that if you pit the rational brain against the emotional brain, in general, it is the emotional brain that is going to win out. In fact, I have this quote out there which says that the rational brain it's not good at being rational. What it is good at is simply rationalize what the emotional brain has already decided to do. And therefore, it behooves us to understand the workings of the instinctual, the emotional brain. Neuromodulators like serotonin, dopamine, cortisol, etc., have a significant impact on who we are, even, for example, who we are in the morning compared to who we are in the afternoon. And that has a huge significance in terms of the nature of the decisions that we make in the morning versus in the afternoon. The answer to this question is that, in general, it is far better off scheduling your decision making in the morning, because that's when the natural levels of serotonin, the natural levels of dopamine. Serotonin is the calming chemical, dopamine is the excitatory chemical. Serotonin levels are going to be normal, because when you wake up in the morning, serotonin levels are going to be high. As a result of which, you can start taking chances, you're less risk averse. Whereas what happens as the day begins to progress is that there's a natural decline in the level of serotonin, as a result of which, when you're making decisions in the afternoon, you will tend to be more risk averse. And therefore, there'll be a tendency to gravitate towards what we call the status quo, the classic status quo bias. And the status quo bias will manifest in the form of an indecision. And that's why you'll see that very often when you're making decisions, important decisions, especially late in the afternoon, very often you end up postponing those decisions, because you like to stick to the status quo. Sleep is extremely critical. Why? Because there's one phase of sleep called deep sleep or slow wave sleep, and this is where our natural levels of serotonin, dopamine, etc. come back to normal. And therefore, if you don't get good quality sleep, what I mean by that is good quality deep sleep or slow wave sleep, you're likely to end up waking up in the morning with lower levels of serotonin, as a result of which you're more likely to be in a type 1 mindset, fearful, more likely to make decisions out of fear, more likely to be risk averse, etc. Previously, people thought that what fitness does is it releases endorphins in the brain, because we all feel good after a workout. Turns out it is really not endorphins. Turns out that there's actually a precursor to serotonin that is released when you are going through a fitness workout. And therefore, it's nature's way to keep our levels of serotonin and dopamine high during the day. I always advise people to have a high protein breakfast, good quality protein. It could be a whey protein, it could be egg protein, egg white, for example. Why? Because as the day begins to progress, right, you had your breakfast like at 7 o'clock in the morning, as the day begins to progress, all these other amino acids are getting absorbed past the blood-brain barrier. One of the last ones to be released and get absorbed is tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin. So which means that if you had a high-quality protein breakfast in the morning, by the time you're hitting about 11:30, when you're going to expect a down, is when you're going to get a serotonin boost, and therefore you're as effective making decisions in the middle of the day as you are in the morning.
All right, well, there you go, a video with Baba Shiv talking about decision making. Although we are talking about feelings here, decision making, according to him, if you caught his first point, is very much emotional. Although he went on to talk about the neuroscience behind decision making, the biology behind decision making, there are so many things that goes on when it comes to even thinking, right? Now, back to his first point of how we tend to be emotional when we make our decisions, I would like to pose the first question to Dr. Eugene. Since you're the author of The Science of Feelings, how would you explain that science that Professor Baba Shiv just explained just now? Is that something consistent with what you have found in your studies of emotions?
Thanks for the question, Alvin, and to everyone who's in here today, a very good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Every time we talk about decision making, or for that matter, any cognitive processes from attention to memory, the formation and the recall, then certainly is, you see the fingerprints of emotion all over it. So I would generally find that, based on my reading and maybe some of the studies that we've conducted as well, that yes, we are very good at rationalizing decisions that are already primarily made on the basis of our gut feel. So if you look into, for instance, hypothesis like the somatic marker hypothesis, right? We refer to bodily sensations, we use them, rely on them. These sensations brought up by emotions, whether we feel anxious, whether we feel angry, a whole list of different emotions, and we rationalize our eventual decisions on that. So if you look into other areas in the cognitive sciences as well, affective forecasting, right? Here's my expectation of how I think I would feel if I needed to make that trip to my in-laws' place or to my friend's place, or if I accepted that invitation to a party. Am I going to enjoy it? Am I not going to enjoy it? And so we find that emotions play a huge role undeniably in and across a wide range of our decision-making processes. I'll just summarize, but with a quote which I really stuck with me. I think it's in the book somewhere, and it's a quote by a neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, who says that we are not thinking machines that feel, but rather we are feeling machines that think. Right, so I would say that you got the fingerprints of emotion everywhere on your cognitive processes, but primarily so within the last 30-40 years or so, research on decision making has told us that it's undeniable that we make decisions on the basis of how we feel.
Thank you, Dr. Eugene. If decision making is highly emotional, and you know how emotions are usually associated with being irrational, it's as though we are irrational in making our emotions. It seems like that, and that's the point that I got from Professor Schiff saying that. And this is why we have got our next panel, Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis, who is an expert in rational, emotions therapy or behavior therapy, because behavior has to be in there. And her late husband is Dr. Albert Ellis, who's the originator of rational emotive behavior therapy, which to me is the origin of cognitive behavior therapy. So we have here today to explain about rationality. I mean, if emotions are irrational, can we ever be rational? Dr. Debbie?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Alvin, and it's such an honor and pleasure to be on this panel with you, Dr. Lin, Dr. Eugene, and with everyone present, and thank you also, Dr. Wilkinson. I do not believe that emotions are rational or irrational. It is our thinking that is rational or irrational. And I think that I differ from some of the views I've heard so far. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I believe that in most cases, most of the time, it's our thinking. Because according to the evidence-based approach of rational emotive behavior therapy, which actually heralded in the cognitive revolution in psychology, it's not an event. It's not what happens that creates our emotions or feelings. I wonder, when we say feelings and emotions, are we interchanging one for the other? I'll stick with the word emotions, if that's okay. And so according to REBT and evidence and research, and perhaps if we think about it, our own experience, it's not an event that creates our emotions, but what we tell ourselves about the event. I also want to point out the difference between rationalizing and rational thinking. They are not the same. When we rationalize something, we're justifying it. Rationalizing could include very irrational thoughts. And so in rational emotive behavior therapy, Dr. Alvin, I'll leave it to you to tell me if and when you want me to quickly describe the difference between rational and irrational. But if I may now, because it will take less time, I'd like to point out the difference between healthy and unhealthy negative emotions. It won't take very long. Now, negative in this context doesn't mean bad. It means it's not that pleasant. Life contains loss and suffering for the majority of us. And to be happy all the time would be somewhat psychopathic, or one is a saint. So when we think in rational ways, which doesn't mean rationalizing, and bad things happen, we are likely to create healthy emotions like grief when someone dies, sadness, disappointment, healthy concerns. So if there's something imminent, we better prepare for it. It's a concern. healthy moral anger when we receive or witness injustice, and finally regret. So as hopefully caring human beings, even though we're fallible and can do good or bad things, we're willing to take responsibility for our actions and regret if we did something wrong in the hope of not repeating them. And now the unhealthy negative emotions that we create when we think in irrational ways include debilitating anxiety, extreme fear, guilt, despondency, hopelessness, depression, and rage, and guilt and shame. And in concluding, because I don't know how much time you want me to talk right now, we have other eminent speakers like Dr. Lin hasn't spoken yet, we create whichever emotion when we know we have the choice and when we know the difference between rational and irrational thinking. So in conclusion of right now, we don't just get an emotion, and I don't believe that emotions necessarily are the greatest influence in decision making. Frankly, I think it's whether we think rationally or irrationally.
Thank you so much, Dr. Debbie. I mean, for also dispelling that, emotions are, quote unquote, irrational, because like what you said, it is very normal to experience whatever emotions. It just depends on how you make it to be helpful or unhelpful with regards to our beliefs. All right, great to see you nodding there. It shows that, I understood. Yeah, right. So with regards to emotions, again, about decision making, we have got Dr. Mei-Hua here, who's an industrial and organizational psychologist. And one of the reasons why we have her is to also show that when it comes to psychology, it's not all just about mental health. It's about the application of the science of behavior, mind, and brain in whatever field. So Dr. Mei-Hua is from the industrial field, industrial organizational. I would like to know from you about how much of affective science is being applied within the organizational setting. You've got decision making, you've got surely there are all kinds of irrational beliefs within the organization that may create conflicts, and there are also rationalizing that happens, as well as developing rational thinking to solve problems. Your comment, please.
Okay. Hi, good day, everybody, and thank you for having me in the panel. One of the things, we at organizational psychologists, we also look at emotions at work, yeah. And I think I do agree with both Eugene and Dr. Debbie that emotions not really rational or irrational. So there are also some research that look at that if you think about emotion as a kind of a loop, right? It closes the loop. So some have, when we talk about gut feelings, some have actually say that gut feelings not really irrational. But if you think about gut feeling as a how to say, so with what we do, right, we gain experience, and in some sense we also gain expertise in some areas, right? Let's say in decision making, and that expertise itself form and what we call an intuitive, informed intuition, which could be packaged as a gut feeling. So it's not saying that it's irrational, but it is actually a form of expertise that will inform us how to we make decisions. So if we take gut feeling as a starting data point, right? And of course, not that we make decisions just based on that, but we use that as something that would facilitate how we approach our decision by not just confirming the gut feeling, but trying to evaluate it. Then we would then arrive at a decision that is well informed. So informed intuitive to, in some sense, then inform intuition. So it's not really rational or irrational. In regards to emotion at work, right? Of course, this is something that is we can look at it at different levels, individual levels, team levels, and of course the organizational level. We will start with just the individual, right? Because we are human, we experience emotion, could be negative, could be positive. And there are some concept of looking at emotion at work, daily emotion at work, which we call discrete emotion. So these are things like fear, anger, boredom, love, gratitude, and pride, right? So we experience all these emotions. But what is really important is to really, for organization, is to really look at how employees experience this emotion daily. Because if they experience these, negatively, and it accumulates, it could result in burnout, and that's what we feel. So even boredom itself, it could be. So don't equate boredom with creative thinking. Sometimes boredom is necessary to have, well, not boredom, but that space of needing to think is actually sometimes a good thing. So some people equate boredom to something negative, but it's not. So for organization, looking at or focusing on emotion is an important thing, because prolonged negative emotion could lead to burnout, whereas certain positive emotion could lead to work engagement. So these are two work outcomes that organization typically would look at. Of course, we want our employees to be engaged, right? And burnout typically also lead to then turnover, people quitting their job. I'll just stop at that at the individual level, but perhaps later I'll talk a bit more about the team level and the organizational level.
Thank you, Dr. Mei-Hua. So it's clearer now that when it comes to emotions, it's not so much about rationality or irrationality or even positive, negative. It's either pleasant or unpleasant, the way we feel things. And Dr. Debbie, back to you, how Dr. Mei-Hua was talking about, emotions within the organizations. As a mental health counselor, do you get many cases of people coming in, not so much with relationship problems privately, but within their workplace, organizations? What are some of the difficulties that individuals might have when they come to see you with regards to work problems?
Yeah. Well, whatever the issue is, whether it's a relation issue, but I'll focus on work because that's what you really asked about. Frankly, it's the same thing that causes emotional distress. It's our attitude. And I think it's tragic. I really do think it's tragic that in this one life we have, that each human being, or the majority of us who are not impaired in some way, but who can think clearly enough, you don't have to be an academic, but are not cognitively impaired. I think it's tragic that we are not taught when we were younger, or at any point, that each one of us is responsible for creating our own emotion. And so taking it back to the workplace, boredom, which Dr. Lin indicates can be helpful, but also not necessarily so, and the experience of burnout, which I don't know if in itself it's an emotion. I think burnout has different emotions and energy states and even physical states as contributing to create it. But I think at the root of any unhelpful, let's call it that, unhelpful emotion in the workplace is the way we think. So there are three very brief core irrational beliefs from which countless others develop. And one or some of them are often present in people in the workplace who are feeling miserable or certainly not positive about being there. And the first one is, and as I say this, I invite any and all of our attendees to consider, do I ever think this way? The first one, I must do well This is a biggie that causes stress. Not that I want to, that's healthy. But I demand that I do well and that I be approved of, loved, appreciated, lauded by everyone. Second one is you. It could be the boss, a colleague, a country, a belief system. You must act and believe the way I think you should. And if you don't, I damn you. And that life should be fair and with justice. And so, there's also the irrational thinking, I must have certainty. Am I going to lose my job? What if, what if, what if? And the demand that not just life should be fair and just, but my boss should be fair. Everyone should appreciate me. And the more we keep on thinking things like this, then not only do we create anxiety and or hopelessness and or rage or guilt, shame, or any cocktail. That affects the body. The mind-body connection is irrefutable. And so in the workplace and anywhere else, what I would recommend is that companies bring in people who can teach employees how to think in rational ways so that they prevent the unhealthy negative emotions. Not every emotion is pleasant, but a lot of the unpleasant ones are healthy. You tell me not to grieve when a loved one dies, I'll think you don't really understand emotions very well. Grief is healthy. It's different from depression. We need to learn the difference. And so in conclusion, because I don't want to keep going and going, and we have such wonderful other speakers, my hope for the work environment and anywhere else is that, number one, people have the opportunity to learn to think in healthy ways. Number two, that people support one another within that environment as they develop perhaps these very new ways of thinking, and that we take enough time outside of work to self-nurture, self-care. That too prevents burnout.
Thank you so much, Dr. Debbie. It's always wonderful to hear you explain things. Dr. Eugene, based on just picking up from what Dr. Debbie said just now about how, it would be wonderful if we can teach children or allow children to learn right from the start as soon as they are able to learn about their emotions and how they might want to manage and understand emotions better. Just wondering, based on your research and then reading on emotions, are there any findings on teaching children about emotions and about managing them in a way that is helpful?
Sorry, that's a great question, Alvin. I was just so excited to jump right in and to answer. And thank you so much, Dr. Debbie, for sharing all your wealth of experience there. Yes, definitely. I think I'm having a field day here. If you can see actually the notes, it's not showing on the screen, right? But notes made, right? Based on my own understanding and learning as well from what I've heard all this while. Certainly there are. And the sort of main initiative or this program that comes to mind is would be social emotional learning. And so folks at Yale University, for instance, right, they have something called the ruler approach, right? And it's essentially, teaching children from a very young age, right, ways in which to identify their emotions. And I just want to pick up on Dr. Debbie's point there, the ability to distinguish between what Dr. Lin mentioned, discrete emotions. That is so important, right? So grief is not the same as depression in the same way that anxiety is not the same as fear. It almost sounds like we're arguing semantics here, but I think there is a practical benefit towards distinguishing these different emotion states, these different discrete emotions. It almost sounds like we're splitting hairs here, but there are cultural differences. We're going to take pride because Dr. Lin mentioned pride, right? Over here, we say, oh, this person is really proud. Well, what do you mean? Is this person arrogant? Is this person boastful? Is this person, full of hubris, right? But there's also a genuine, authentic pride, so much so that some researchers have called it a Janus-faced emotion, a two-faced emotion, right? There's good pride, that's not so good pride. That's pride that really makes you seem like a haughty, standoffish, sort of like aloof person, but also genuine, authentic pride that you should well and truly savor and enjoy if you've done something for the collective good. And if if I could just go back to the main question before I start, digressing again, I think there are a series of books that have been out in the market right now. I actually have bought a couple, and one of my favorite authors in this area is illustrator as well, Trace Maroney. So those of you in the audience who are interested in maybe trying to encourage, kids, young children, maybe young children, right, to understand emotions. There's a series of books called I Am Feeling, and each book has a distinct emotion. I'm feeling jealous, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling proud, I'm feeling love, I'm feeling, fearful, frightened, a whole range of them, right? So these are great starting points, and there are also guiding notes at the back of the book as well for parents, for educators, on really explaining the importance of teaching kids to be mindful, to be accepting, right? Not to fight back against their emotions. So I think that's an excellent resource for anyone who's interested.
Thanks, Dr. Eugene. I mean, we are touching on children learning about managing emotions. I suppose that's where we move into resilience training. We're helping children to learn to be resilient as they grow up. And within the university setting where I'm at, where you are at as well, all of us are at, we are starting to see a lot of students going through a lot of emotional difficulties, especially now with the pandemic going on. Having to attend class online and not really see each other face to face can be a very difficult thing. So, it's something that we understand. It's something that we see the need for resilience, continued resilience training in individuals as we are growing up, even ourselves at various times of our lives. So I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Lin with regards to resilience training. Maybe not so much at the workplace, but as an academic, a lecturer. Where do you see, okay, it's me trying to think of a proper sentence because it's all jumbled up right now. I'm so glad that Dr. Debbie is here to say that you don't have to really, be perfect and stuff. So yeah, that's a wonderful thing to, understand that. That's fine. Anyway, back to Dr. Lin. Where do you see the role of resilience training in university? I mean, maybe not so much among students only, but also among academics, because I think we're all struggling. At least I'm struggling. I don't know about you. Yeah, you care to comment?
It is. One of the things is sometimes we have to look at the way we structure our expectation, right? I mean, organization or even to see, because sometimes we reward people, right, or students when they do well, which means we are also signaling that don't fail, right? But when we look at resilience, it's really about how to pick ourselves up when we fail, and the idea is it's okay to fail, and then we have to be able to close that gap for the students, right? So if you look at our scholarship structure, you have to maintain these grades and all, and that makes it sometimes fearful for students because there's so much things that's tied to that reward. Even when it's with staff, we get evaluated based on our performance and then our failures. One of the things that we need to I guess organizations to look at is the culture or the climate of making mistake, that we have to be able to facilitate that making mistakes may not be something that is detrimental, but be able to see how we can facilitate that acceptance of making mistakes in organizational climate and culture. And we don't see much of that in organization, or even sometimes the way we treat students, because we look at the grades, the outcome, but not really the experience that we had. So I think university or even organization have to try to facilitate that in order to build resilience. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. That ties so nicely with what Dr. Debbie said earlier about, demanding that there's a must. I must do well. I must be perfect. I must get an A. Otherwise, I'm absolutely useless, kind of thing. And that puts a lot of pressure, isn't it, on any individual?
Yes.
I think this may be a good time, Dr. Debbie, to also share how we are better able to develop that kind of acceptance of, for example, reaction to failure, and to turn it into something more helpful. Dr. Debbie?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have a choice when we know we have a choice, and when we have the opportunity to learn healthy versus unhealthy attitudes. If when we're little, we're brought up in a home where the parents punish us if we don't do well, or, you worthless thing, you only got an A-, and so by osmosis and overt language, it's understandable that a child grows into a teen, grows into an adult that has that demand, I must do well, etc., or it proves I'm unworthy. It proves I'm not enough. And I think one way or another, it's so important to educate others and ourselves that each one of us has worth simply because we exist. Now, that's not to say each one of us doesn't have some unique skill or talent or potential to develop. But coming back to, and Dr. Eugene mentioned semantics, and words do have meaning. Words create thoughts, thoughts create emotions, all of them influence how we behave, whether we're a child and we're unaware of that, or an adult and we're getting aware of it or unaware of it. And so if we're willing to remind ourselves that every human, we're biological creatures. Show me one thing in nature, and are we any less a part of nature than the weather, the trees, the birds, the insects? Is there anything in nature that is totally perfect and successful all the time? Now, we might say, and I don't think this is unhealthy, that there's perfection if we accept imperfection. The world is acceptable even with its imperfections. And so I think some key lessons for voluntary brainwashing or teaching and encouraging are, if we make a mistake, it doesn't mean we're a mistake, we're a fallible human. The tsunami, so much destruction, but an incredible part of nature. It had a bad outcome, but it still has value and is an inevitable part of this biological world we live in. So as biological creatures, with the amazing capability, if we use it, to think about our thinking and use our thinking to craft, to get part of the art of creating emotions, then we accept we're fallible. When we fail, we are not failures. We failed at this. What can I learn? How can I prevent it? And to work in conclusion, so I don't go on and on, of practicing unconditional acceptance of others. That doesn't mean accepting their bad behaviors, okay, and doing what we can to bring justice, but to remember they, like we, were babies too. And if we had their biochemistry, their upbringing, the way they think, we might act in bad ways like we're judging them as having acted, but they're not bad through and through. They acted in bad ways. A person who does a lot of good deeds isn't a good person. They did a lot of good deeds. So really, in conclusion for now, let us contemplate the importance of unconditional acceptance of ourselves and others and life. Cherish the ability we have to learn from any mistakes, and be kind and accepting of others when they screw up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Debbie. So from what I hear, that it's kind of like a full circle. We started with the science of feelings, the science of emotions, and when I hear you explain about the practice to me is an art. So we have gone full circle from science of feelings to the art of managing emotions, and that's a nice balance. And from what you said, it just got me thinking when it comes to nature. If we demand that nature is nice and orderly, we will not have forests or jungles to go into. We'll have an estate, isn't it? It's all nice and orderly, and that's not very natural. So yes, I suppose let's learn to accept jungles and forests. They're nice to go into, which is why we need to conserve all this nature, conservation science. Although it's not part of our topic today, coming soon. Watch this space. A psychology month at Sunway University. Yes, this is a shameless plug because I got no shame. It's nice and free. Yes, get on to Sunway University's social media page. There's going to be a public talk on psychology for planetary health coming soon. Anyway, I've noticed that Nicholas has opened the floodgates of questions. I think it will be a good time now to allow our participants to ask questions. So that these very eminent speakers can answer you. This is a great opportunity because it's not easy to get these three people here. So far we have got comments. Ellen White says she thoroughly enjoys this. She loves the mix of expert reviews, but she's got a client, so she's a counselor. She has to go. Good friend of mine. There's Chan Wai Tak, eye-opening. Thank you. Going for class now. Yeah, I guess we're all very busy people. Garani says we should start creating workspaces with green concept. That's nice. Yes, any questions? Oh, each other, do you have any questions for each other? No?
Not quite. I just wanted to agree with Dr. Debbie when she mentioned, well, to overturn assumptions that it's the event that causes the emotion. And certainly the newer, some more contemporary models of emotion as well. It's the interpretation of the situation, right? That is the cause of the emotion, the resulting emotion. It reminds me very much of a quote. I can't quote it verbatim, but it goes something like, it's not so much the thing, whether it's good or bad, but thinking that actually makes it so. So yeah, there we go, right? So, yep, Dr. Ellis, right. So yeah, I think that's in line with a lot of the contemporary models of emotion, and certainly in my agreement as well, right? To think about why we feel the way we do, and we've seen work in, say, emotion regulation, or how we reappraise, reinterpret to better understand what it is that we are going through. This emotional experience that's flooding us, right? And so that seems to me a rational way to actually process what it is that we're going through. So yeah, I think I just wanted to add to that. So thank you for sharing that, Dr. Debbie.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Eugene. We now have our first question from Ethan. What does teaching adults to explain their feelings to each other look like? I've always been curious how we can teach emotional literacy to adults in the workplace so there's less miscommunication and better understanding. Anyone? Dr. Lin, perhaps?
I think, okay. I think we also in the culture, well, in Malaysia sometimes, or even in certain culture where we try to repress our emotion, or we don't really talk about our emotion. Of course, that's why I think ability to accept, discuss, talk about emotion should start from a very, very young age. Yeah, and that would then allows people to, even in the workplace, to be more open about it. We don't really teach much emotional literacy in workplace, but they are, of course, then demand or looking at that emotional intelligence is very important for work setting. Yeah, and more organizations are not just looking at the IQ, but the emotional intelligence, ability to identify own emotion, others' emotion, regulate our emotion, as well as ability to take action to then overcome these emotion, I guess, discrepancy. But one thing we have really focused very much on, individual level. We focus on how do we regulate or how do we rationalize our emotion. But I see sometimes positive and negative emotion comes from the relationship between employees and supervisor, employees and the organization itself. So if we see it as a relationship, right? So in any relationship, it does affect in some sense our emotion. So so when employees and organization, there's an expectation of what we call a psychological contract. Yeah, some beliefs about how organization should behave. So expectation between employees and employers. So when we have that breach of that psychological contract, it can result in negative emotions. So one thing we shouldn't just look at is the individual responsibility, in dealing with the emotion, but we also should look at how organization, in terms of policy, in terms of how they. So this is related to what we call the organizational justice, right? Fairness. How do we regulate fairness in order to, or communicate fairness in order to, well, not result in negative emotion. And so the way I see it is psychological contract, ensuring certain organizational justice or fairness. And then that leads to my research interest, which is trust. And then I see trust as an outcome of all these processes. And again, we see at individual level, right? Let's talk about trust as an emotion, right? Not an emotion, but an outcome of all these aspects. So if we see trusting behaviors, then what happens is then it becomes, let's say, an emotion contagion, right? And that at individual level, if you have trust, then it would then build up to an organizational trust climate, right? But if you have a lot of, let's say, distrust in the organization, then you have basically a distrust climate. So, okay, to summarize, understand emotion starts from young, right? But it shouldn't be just looking at individual level, but how organization can shape their policy, their expectation, and most importantly, their communication in order to look at ways to minimize negative type of outcomes.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Lin. So it's not just about direct training or teaching people how to manage emotions, but it's a whole structure, isn't it? A whole network around us that we need to put into place. Of course, easier said than done. Yeah. Dr. Debbie is saying something there. Yeah, please comment.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's important and most beneficial to have both and. If you have a kind of regulations and structures and certain things are encouraged, but individuals are still thinking in ways that I can't stand him or she makes me sick, I don't think it's going to work. I actually think both are important, but perhaps if we want to choose which is more, I think on an individual level. And if more and more individuals are remaining stable when there are challenges at work, they're models of what's possible. If a majority of individuals are like freaking out and that, like a pandemic, can spread. And so even if there are just a few individuals that, yeah, this isn't good, but maybe let's talk about changing, but this is still good, but rather than give up or impulsive reaction, then I think it can make a difference. So I really believe both are important. And if I had to choose which is more important, individuals. And, you know, when we talk about relationships, well, they consist of individuals and it takes two to tango, you know, but sometimes it's helpful that one, and it often happens, is the more steady, stable one, and best case scenario, the other does their best to dance that dance because the outcome is good for both, for the unit.
Thank you, Dr. Debbie. Dr. Eugene, you have anything to add? We've got tons of questions coming in.
No, right. So I'm just looking through the chat and I'm wondering, you know what? I'll let you pick a question, Alvin, and then.
Okay, all right. Yeah, just on that note, Honey, if you're out there and listening, let us know if we are going over time. So you are all powerful in managing this whole forum. You're all powerful goddess. Please let us know when we have to stop.
No, we do have time for the Q&A session. We've got, you can take about 10 minutes to address all these questions. No worries.
Thank you.
We're all ears.
Yes, I think some of the questions can be combined, like from Ginny Lam. I think this is our Ginny Lam. Is there stress that is bad or good? And then I'm going to skip that one to Mary Asunta's question. Not a skip, but we're going to just want to link it to Mary Asunta's question. When feeling negative about something, but knowing that it's not good. Oh, sorry. So some YY's question. Would it be more helpful to teach children the differences between helpful and unhelpful thinking? I think that ties in quite well with good or bad stress. Would anyone like to take those two, or correct me if you feel that you don't agree with me?
I think it would be helpful to clarify, what do you mean by stress? The way I understand stress, I don't think it's very helpful. I really don't. I mean, it affects blood pressure, heart, cardiovascular system, according to my definition of stress. Again, we come, don't we, Dr. Eugene, back to semantics. And for those of us who are therapists or who are training to be therapists, one of the elements of a most effective therapist, in my opinion, is that they take time to check, well, do I understand you, my client, correctly? When you say stress, what do you mean? So, because my idea of it might be different from yours. But coming back to what I said earlier, one of the aspects of the approach I embrace and teach and live by, rational emotive behavior therapy, as I said earlier, it teaches, yeah, there are positive emotions, and unless we suffer from psychopathy and we're only ever happy even when tragic things happen, that's not what we want. They're positive and negative, but I think it's so important to learn how to distinguish under the negative umbrella the difference between the healthy ones and the unhealthy ones. So coming back to stress, I often associate the causation of stress as anxiety or rage. Because depression and guilt and shame, generally, you know, that they lead to more of a low kind of effect. But anxiety and rage can lead to that stress experience that affects the body. And so what is the healthy negative counterpart to anxiety? Concern. It's not about being in some neutral, everything's okay man zone. No, concern, adrenaline, my paper's due, I better get up off my tushy and finish it, right? But anxiety and stress, oh no, we can do a lousy job, not sleep, find ways to get out of it, procrastinate. So in conclusion, with my understanding of the meaning of stress, I don't think there's good or bad. I don't think it's helpful. And let's learn to think in healthy ways. So yeah, concern, but not anxiety that leads to unhealthy stress.
Lots of levels of it.
Yeah.
To deconstruct, look at it more closely and understand where it comes from, where it's heading, and what we do about them. Wonderful.
And from Dr. Debbie on the subjectivity of stress, it's really a subjective experience, and as much as researchers have tried to objectify saying that this is the most stressful event, that is a little bit less stressful. I think it's a subjective experience. Some events, some situations, it might seem really minor to some individuals, but it might rile up a lot more anxiety in another individual. So yeah, going beyond seeing that good stress, bad stress, or some of you might be aware of distress versus eustress. I think some degree of stress, some, like you mentioned, Debbie, the anxiety of, my paper is due, I need to get that done. That in a way propels or pushes you from the back to say, well, look, you need to get this done because the deadline is coming up, right? So to some extent, my understanding is that that degree of stress might actually propel you, might be motivating some people. I've known a former dean, for instance, who says that stress is my friend because I get things done when I'm stressed, right? And some people leave it to the very last minute because they feel pumped, they feel energized, they feel excited, and there's a deadline coming up. So I would think at the root of it all, it's a subjective experience. I think we need to properly understand what it is that rouses that in us and how that might be different from that of other people's experiences.
Right. I mean, my hunch is it's the thinking that creates the differences. But
Yeah.
Dr. Eugene, don't you think concern would be as much of a motivator and perhaps a more effective one in the bigger picture than anxiety?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So rather than be, gripped with anxiety, the concern that, if I understand you correctly, that I really want to get this done, is my concern that I'm not letting down my co-authors on that paper or the person who's writing on that email. So I would think that, yes, understanding it, or in my view, kind of like reappraising that as an indication that this emotion is telling you should be concerned about what's going to happen if, for instance, this deadline is actually not met, or this deliverable is actually not sent through to your coworkers. So agree with you on that.
It sounds to me like it's important to identify the kind of feelings you have.
Yeah.
I think too often it's about, oh, I'm not very comfortable, it has to be stress. Oh, stress is not good. So I need to feel really anxious about it. So it's as though there's a script that we have to follow, and we get trapped in it. Yeah. There are quite a few questions that I think touches on that. There's one on hypocrisy. When we are feeling negative about something, but knowing that it's not good, so we try to pretend that it's okay. Isn't that hypocrisy? I guess it is. We've covered that already. That it's natural. Emotions are natural. It depends on what you do about them. And to keep on learning, it's an art, isn't it? To learn the science, which is why we are here, and we are also hearing a lot of art, bit of practice. So it's practice, practice, practice. Because again, we're not perfect. Ta-da! We just carry on and come for more of this kind of forums. It's good. Have discussions. Maybe we could sell this.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
Really brief.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. No, the art. When we think about art, what's involved? Creativity. There's not a rigid set of rules. We create, we're the artist, we're the creator, we're the master of the creation. And so why I mentioned to you in earlier correspondence about tonight that the art of creating feelings, each one of us has the power to create our emotional destinies. If we make an intention and a decision to learn how to think in the healthy ways that create healthy emotions, hence the art of feelings and creating feelings.
Yes, I think I created an acronym, right, called ACCEPT, art of creating and communicating emotions. I forget what the PT was, but anyway, we'll get there somehow.
I have it here, the art of creating, communicating, and experiencing positive thoughts, Dr. Alvin.
Yeah.
You are brilliant.
Ta-da! New book coming out. Anyway, I think Shinjie here has got a very good question. Speaking of resilience, has anyone heard of the concept of anti-fragility? Something that goes beyond resilience and robustness, coined by author Nassim Taleb. If yes, I'd appreciate any thoughts about it. Anti-fragility, like not fragile. What do you think?
Interesting question, Shinjie. All right. Anti-fragility is this concept, like you correctly identified, by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. And I think the basic idea is that things need to be challenged, things need to be almost broken to a point where it's only with such, in the face of adversity and challenges that they actually become better, isn't it? So I think it's a concept that was popularized in the book of the same name, Anti-Fragile, right? I don't know a lot of psychological research on this. I know a group of students of mine tried to come up with an anti-fragility scale, though, but there's not a lot on the backing literature to actually, tell us what it is. Either the closest approximation, and I think this is a poor approximation, will be something like post-traumatic growth, right? But yeah, it definitely goes beyond resilience. It's a concept that's distinct from mere grit, resilience, robustness, right? Even psychological courage. These are related terms, but it doesn't really quite, address what anti-fragility is, at least not what Taleb actually mentions. But, speaking like an academic here, great opportunity for research, further research.
All right, thanks, Dr. Eugene. We've got Lippy Emma asking, in the saying, we learn from our experiences. Would you say that experience is the best or worst teacher in terms of learning to manage our emotions? I'm also getting the sense that there are a lot of, how do you call that? Opposites, good, bad, best, worst, in the kinds of questions that we get. Anyway, what do you call it? Dichotomy. Yes, thank you. You're good with words there. Yeah, how do we address this kind of dichotomy when it's so common, so easy for anyone to just think good or bad? If it's bad, then what do we do? Oh no, it has to be bad. And what's a good thing? From what we discussed all this while, it's a sliding scale, isn't it? Yeah. Depends on how we see things. So could you comment on this? Anyone? Do I make sense?
I'm willing to, but I feel I've spoken a lot. I want to give Dr.
We can do the Malaysian thing. Let me teach you what it is. There's this thing they call lat, tali lat, lai li, tam plom. So it's either the back of your hand facing up or the palm of your hand facing up. And if there are three of you, and if you're the one that's odd, you get the answer.
Okay.
Never mind. Carry on answering.
No, I like the song though. That was good fun. Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable about rigid dichotomies. And I also think that one thing need not necessarily be the opposite of another. It could be a whole other species. For example, some people have said to me, well, isn't sadness and disappointment just a mild form of depression? And no, they're two different emotional experiences that we create when we think in different ways. Depression, I can't stand it, it's awful, it'll never be good again, it shouldn't be this way, it's hopeless. And sadness and disappointment, I wish it hadn't happened this way. This is rational thinking. It's very, very sad. I'm going to miss that person. I'm going to miss this chapter in my life. So it's not sadness and grief and disappointment are mini depression and hopelessness. They're different creatures created by different thinking, and comes back to, I wish that from as early as possible till before we die, we learn and apply our knowledge of the difference between life-enhancing rational attitudes and destructive and at worst, really damaging, unhealthy, negative emotions created by irrational thinking.
Very nice. All right, so the all-powerful goddess Honey has informed me that now we need to stop this and let Dr. Eugene T deliver his sermon. So if you don't mind, Honey, I'll pass it on to back to you, or
yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Eugene, Dr. Lin, and Dr. Debbie for your wonderful insights. And of course, Prof. Elvin, the ever reliable Prof. Elvin, for moderating this session. Thank you so much to everybody for your active involvement. Apologies that we weren't able to answer all questions, but I will try to address them at a later time, maybe. Yeah, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to now present a Sunway University Press book titled The Science of Feelings, What Psychological Research Tells Us About Our Emotions, written by our panelist, Dr. Eugene T. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to invite Dr. Eugene for a special book reading and closing remarks. Dr. Eugene, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hani. I've not seen that video. I was just wondering if I could get a copy of it later.
Sure, no problem. Yes, we'll be happy to.
Wonderful video, and thank you so much for the support that you've provided, you and the entire team at Sunway University Press. This book would not have been, it would not be on the shelves in the hands of people, interested readers, curious readers, were it not for the excellent work that you've all put in from start to end. I want to say a special thank you to Sarah Lowe, who I've been corresponding with throughout this entire time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being a part of our forum here today. I hope you've enjoyed the session. And as Ms. Hani has mentioned, I'll be doing a reading of The Science of Feelings. I'm mindful of the time, and well, maybe to my benefit, I do speak a little bit quickly. So we should be able to end on time. I timed myself, so let's get going. The Science of Feelings, what psychological research tells us about our emotions. What are emotions, and why do we experience them? In the last 50 years or so, psychological science has shed light on the essence of what makes us human, why we experience a range of feelings from joy to sadness, anger to fear, from compassion to contempt. Yet the science of emotion remains mostly inaccessible to the curious reader and those outside academic circles. This book is a story of our emotions, a story of why and how we feel as human beings. It is a tale of our emotions told by philosophers, biologists, neuroscientists, sociologists, and economists. Drawing on the rich psychological research on emotions, this book invites you to revisit your emotions and to better appreciate and understand how feeling states define us and our humanity. Chapter 1, Experiencing Emotions Again for the First Time. An etymology of the word emotion. Human beings have a wonderfully creative habit of noticing the world around them and crafting myths and legends from their observations. Our immensely imaginative minds have been used to create a coherent, understandable world around us. Myths and legends helped our forefathers and ancestors to make sense of a world that was, not too long ago, frightening and fraught with dangers. Human stories are universal, found in every known human culture, and so too is language. Our words may be different, but they are universal in that they have been fashioned for purposes of bonding, cooperation, and of course, storytelling. However, residing at the core of myths, legends, and languages, and what makes human stories so compelling are our emotions. It's probably no coincidence that our most memorable stories from our early ancestral history, where we're still roaming the savannas, to events in recent history are shaded strongly by how these stories make us feel. For example, the word phobia, which describes intense, irrational fears, is derived from the god of fear, Phobos, who rode into war with his brother Deimos, who himself is the personification of another emotion, terror. The god Eros, the god of sensuality, desire, and sexuality, gave us the word erotic, while the word zeal was added to our emotion lexicon, courtesy of Zealous, the deity also known for its envy, jealousy, and eager rivalry. Chapter 2, and mind you, I won't be going through all the chapters, just selected chapters. Chapter 2, between the universal and the unique. Universal, yet unique. Much of what we know about the origins of emotions stems from two distinct but complementary views. Evolution and genetic forces have indeed made an indelible impression on our emotion architecture, allowing us to continually experience and express emotions that have been essential to ours and our ancestors' survival. Yet, the complexities of human culture mean that we experience and express emotions in a myriad of ways that extend beyond our palette of, just say, 6 basic emotions. We have blended through our language this initial set of emotions, giving rise to culturally unique feeling words, colored by countless linguistic shades. Chapter 5, I believe, personality and emotion. Catching the emotion of others. Are you someone who only needs to hear or see brief, fleeting expressions of emotions in order to feel them yourself? For instance, you walk into the waiting area of your dentist, notice that the room is filled with tense-looking patients awaiting their turn, and start feeling anxious yourself. A useful analogy for susceptibility to emotion is to think of this individual difference as similar to sensitivity towards viruses or illnesses. Recall that time you found yourself giggling in response to hearing your friend's infectious laughter, or that time you said your heart goes out to refugees who have suffered terrible loss or tragedy. All the time you felt furious and a deep sense of injustice, hearing that your colleague was treated unfairly by her boss. Emotional expressions like disease-causing pathogens are contagious, and some of us are more prone towards catching emotional expressions in our immediate environments than are others. This process of catching the emotion of others has a fitting description: emotional contagion. Chapter 6, necessarily irrational. Talked about irrationally quite a fair bit. Is there really anything irrational about emotions? For the larger part of psychology's history, we tended to give negative labels to our emotions. We tended to give or see them as disruptive and volatile. Emotions were seen as an unwanted influence on our thoughts and actions. But maybe what we have labeled as irrational all this while simply reflects our limited understanding and suspicion about emotions. However, thanks in no small part to behavioral economists, we now know that emotions are not just a complement to rationality, but instead a necessity to it. We are not just necessarily irrational, but rather effectively so. Last chapter, chapter 10, is the future of feelings. We know what makes us human. It is how we feel that sets us distinctly apart from an automaton. Our emotions are an indispensable part of our humanity, and one that robots and androids will find extremely difficult to replicate. And even so, by the time you're reading this or you're viewing this recording sometime in the future, when we have all intelligent computerized life forms walking among us, did it turn out to be a good idea? Just asking from the past. Automation will replace some jobs, but not all of them. The world will still need mothers to read bedtime stories to their children and tuck them into bed. It will still need counselors to reassure the distraught couple that they can work through the challenges in their failing marriage. Tip of the hat to you, Dr. Debbie. It will still need leaders to rouse employees towards a challenging and hopeful future. Tip of the hat to you, Dr. Lin. It will still need teachers who can create environments that will pique students' curiosity when they learn. Tip of the hat to Dr. Alvin. The future then seems, optimistically, less of one where computers dominate us. It is likely to be one in which we use computers to complement our human abilities, our most innate, sacred, sacrosanct abilities. Robots will not be teaching us to be like them anytime soon. If anything, we will be teaching robots to be more like us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying on, and I hope you enjoyed that reading. Back to you, Han.
That was very engaging. Thank you so much, Dr. Eugene, for the reading and for the excellent book. Thank you so much.
Oh, hello, Sarah.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, to mark this special day, Sunway University Press is offering the book presented today at a special rate exclusively to all participants of this forum. So don't miss this chance and contact us at sup@sunway.edu.my. That's sup@sunway.edu.my to grab your copy now. You will find the email address in the chat box as well. Okay, once again, we take this opportunity to thank our distinguished panelists, Dr. Eugene, Dr. Debbie, and Dr. Lin, and of course, Prof. Elvin, the moderator, for your time and for providing meaningful insights into the world of emotions. Thank you also to all of you for joining our first forum of Psychology Month 2022. We do have more psychology-related events in store for you in the coming weeks. On the 23rd February, that's 23rd February, we will have a forum titled Mending Hearts, where we will discuss the trials and tribulations and unexpected silver linings of relationships. And on 3rd March, we will have a forum titled Lifespan Psychology, where we will explore developmental psychology and the challenges that each stage in the human lifespan brings. So mark your calendars and keep a lookout on Sunway University Press's Facebook and LinkedIn pages for more information. Thank you again for being with us this morning, and we hope you had a good time. Stay safe and goodbye.